Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors, and if you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled, "Neighbors trespassed on my property and stole a kayak from my lake. I caught them in the act." One thing I love about my property is that I have my own lake right in the backyard. Now, not the entire thing is my property, and I will get back to that point in a little while. Still, having a lake back there has been amazing for me and my family. The area surrounding it was not in the best shape, and I did not want my kids getting hurt, so I fixed it up with some large rocks and made a small dock. We mainly use the lake to ride in our kayak, fish, and in general enjoy ourselves. Enter my a-hole neighbor who moved in a few months before this whole story started. It was winter at that point, so there was no issue regarding the pond until spring hit. Now, I have a gate surrounding my land, and that includes the entrance to the dock I built that I consider the entrance to the lake. Once spring hit, neighbor was constantly asking my permission for his kids to use my dock and go into the lake. These kids were small, and from the sounds of it, neighbor also expected me to supervise his kids because they were dressed for swimming and he was dressed like he was going out somewhere. Obviously, my answer was a big no, and that he could not come onto my property and use the dock. I was not going to get in trouble if something happened to them, and also I just did not want people I didn't know on my property, which is kind of understandable if you ask me. After a while, he stopped asking, and I figured that he got the message. That is when I found out one day that he was actually sneaking over the fence when I was not around and using my dock without permission. It was only because another neighbor saw him and let me know what was going on. I could also tell that some of my supplies had been used because the kayak was wet despite not being used, and a fishing pole was clearly messed with and for some reason all tangled up. I'm not a shy person about things and walked right up to the neighbor to let him know that I knew what he was doing. And then he had to stop. He got angry and started threatening to call the police on me for restricting him access to his own land. Back to the point of me saying that I did not actually own the entire lake, it was shared between my property, neighbor's property, and two houses on the other side of the lake that have no purpose to this story. To be technical about it all, neighbor does have the right to use the lake, however there is no reason I have to let him use it from my land. I tried to explain to him that if he wanted to build his own dock and entry point he could, but I was not going to let him use my property. He did not know that I was a man of my word and was not going to let him get away with doing whatever he wanted. He still trespassed and used my kayak. I could not store it anywhere, but the fishing gear got locked up in the garage where he could not get his hands on it. He was even getting cockier and using my kayak and my dock when I was home and could see him doing it. He even dared me once to call the police because he could be back in his house before they showed up. It was a spread out town, so the police would take a while to get there. Instead, I decided that I was going to get revenge on this guy and planned the perfect way to do it. Usually, I like giving a person a taste of their own medicine for revenge. Neighbor did not have a dock or anything to use, so I needed to come up with something else. Instead though, I created a plan that would catch them in the act and get them caught once and for all. I know I could have used a camera, but that just seemed boring, and I have heard stories of that with the police taking forever to actually do something about it. No, I had to have this guy caught red-handed for trespassing and theft. The main step in this plan was to actually make small holes in my own kayak. She was not really a ship, but it was the closest I got to feeling like a captain. Sacrifices had to be made though, and she was getting a little old anyway. Then I left some of my fishing gear out on the dock again, this time older ones that I did not really use anymore, all of which were labeled with my name, which will be important later. A couple days passed and their neighbor jumped the fence with his son and they fell right into my trap. They took the fishing gear and the kayak and rowed out towards the middle of the lake. They did not get very far before realizing they were taking on water from the holes and clearly had no idea what they were doing. With a kayak, especially if you don't know what you're doing, once it starts to go down, you really cannot paddle it back. I took that moment to call the police and let them know that my neighbors were in the middle of the lake sinking in a kayak. When the police got there, the neighbor and his son had just finally gotten out of the water and back onto my dock. For anyone wondering, his son had a life vest on and they both could swim, so they were not in any danger. The police did not even get a chance to ask a question before neighbor came right up to me and started yelling that I did that on purpose to ruin his weekend fishing plans. No idea how he had those plans since he did not know my fishing gear was out till he got to the kayak, and then he said the worst possible thing that he could have right in front of the police officers. "Neighbor, you keeping a kayak in condition like that, I ought to sue you for damages and take your whole dock." And yep, he was angry and raging enough that he confessed without realizing it to the police. They started asking questions like, did he have permission to use the dock or kayak? And was he let into the property by an owner? He tried to say that I let him in, but I was quick to shut him down and tell him that I had witnesses that could say otherwise. Then he tried to cover the story by saying that it was his kayak and fishing poles that he had taken out on the lake and had only used the dock. They did not buy his story for a second about the kayak being his, and I noticed that swimming back he still had the fishing poles. I pointed out how they were labeled with my name and the police had heard enough. They told him that he was not to trespass on my property ever again or he could be arrested. I decided to get a restraining order against him anyway so that he might see it as a little more legal. He knows enough about me now to know I would not hesitate calling the police on him again. I did not try and sue him for money because at the end of the day it was me that put the holes in the kayak. I probably couldn't have gotten away with saying he somehow ruined it, but I'm not that kind of person. As of writing this, he has stayed on his side of the fence and has not even said a word to me since the police came that day. Sometimes winning can just feel like a weight is taken off your shoulders. And yeah, Ripe Stars, time and time again I really find it fascinating how some people have the audacity to not only trespass on your property, but then also use your personal items for their pleasure. Okay, maybe that sounded a little bit wrong, but still, you catch my drift. Did you ever have any neighbors that used your personal property or maybe even stole it? Let us know in the comments, and while you're at it, I would really appreciate it if you could post some star emojis in the comments if you want to support me. And the next one is titled Petty Revenge Story. I was living in an apartment with just myself and my two daughters who were twins. There was no assigned parking and myself and the people who lived below me often ended up parking in spots fairly close to each other. I had just purchased my first non-beta car, so I was being very cautious about how I parked. I was not bumping into anything, parking too close to the line, etc. The neighbors, however, constantly parked right on the edge, crooked and sometimes over the line. One night I came home from work and all the spots in front of the apartments we lived in were empty. I remembered this because it was odd and kind of a cool, I don't have to squeeze in or park a mile away moment. The next morning me and my girls leave to go grocery shopping. My neighbor's car is parked right next to ours and there is a very large noticeable scratch and dent on its door. It honestly looked like someone had intentionally slammed their door into it repeatedly. We get home and are carrying our groceries up the stairs. It takes a few trips. After the last trip I am in the doorway and one of my daughters comes racing up behind me. "Mom, there is a lady asking," other daughter's name, a bunch of questions even though she said she cannot talk to her. I am big on the don't talk to strangers thing, so I head down and ask what I can do for her, and the conversation basically goes as follows. M for me, N for neighbor, NBF for neighbor's boyfriend and husband. Me, can I help you? Neighbor, I think your kid may have hit my car with your car door. Maybe she didn't, but she refuses to answer me, so she seems guilty. Me, well, first of all, my daughter does not know you and she does not have to answer you. In fact, I'm going to ask you to not speak to my daughters unless I am present or I give you permission. Secondly, my daughters are 10. I don't allow them to get into my car without me. I can assure you they have not hit your car. In fact, I always stress to them to be careful when opening their door because people often park close. When do you think this happened? Neighbor, last night. And you're not with your kid every time they open a door. No one is. It could have happened when they were getting something out of it. Me, well, since I live on the 3rd floor, I actually don't let my kids go get things out of the car without me. I'm just not comfortable being unable to get them quickly if something were to happen. And last night we parked before you got home and remained parked all night until we left this morning for groceries. The dent was already there when we left, so it was not my car that hit yours. Sorry, I guess. Neighbor, your car is white and the paint left on my door is white. It's obviously yours. Your kids did this. Me, I point out that there is not a single scuff on any of my doors, including the inside that would have hit. I also open my door and show her that where my door would hit her car is above where her damage was. I have an SUV and she had a small low-to-the-ground sedan. So even if you don't believe me that my kids are not allowed in my car unsupervised, it could not have been my car that did this damage. Neighbor begins getting very angry and loud at this point. I don't care, you're the only one around here with kids. I see them almost hit other cars all the time. And you park too close to other cars. You need to start parking further away. If it happens again, I'll get your insurance involved. Me, okay, we are done here. Do what you think you need to. I start to head up the stairs and her boyfriend comes out and blocks my way. NBF, what did she say? Neighbor yelling angrily, she's trying to say it was not them. She's trying to lie and say her kids don't get in the car without her. NBF, that's BS. We have seen them almost hit lots of cars. Me, you need to move. I have explained to her that it couldn't have been my car. You need to get out of my way now and let me pass. NBF, nah, it was yours. The paint is white. You got kids. We have seen them hit other cars. Me, you literally just said you have seen them almost hit other cars, and now you're saying that you have seen them actually hit cars. Neither is true. At this point, I simply move to the next stairwell over and start heading up. Neighbor screaming at me, no, you're not going to take responsibility for what your kids do. If you're not going to pay me, I need your insurance information now. Me, you don't need it, and you are not getting my insurance information because I was not involved in any kind of accident or contact with your vehicle. You really need to stop screaming at me. We both pay a lot to live here, as do all of our neighbors. No one needs to hear irate screaming in the parking lot. Neighbor, we saw your kids do it. We are going to call the cops and we are going to tell everyone here how your kids hit their cars too. Anyone who has a scratch is going to know to come to you. At this point, I turned the voice record feature on my phone. Me, that was the first time you have said you saw my kids do that. You're literally making things up now. You cannot go around door to door here. It is against community rules in the lease that everyone has to abide by. And you cannot just go around lying because you want someone to fix your car. Neighbor, you're going to take responsibility or we will tell everyone you hit their cars. I shut the door and called the police myself to explain the situation because after they lied and changed their story to that they actually saw my kids hit their car, I was worried they would make that report. The apartment complex management was not there on weekends, but I told them the following Monday. They assured me that they could not do what they threatened and told me not to worry about it and said that they would give them a verbal warning. The police came and I played the recording for them and showed them how my car had no damage and my door did not even line up with their damage. The neighbors went inside and shut their door when they saw the police pull up. The police basically told me I had nothing to worry about and it sounded more like they were trying to get someone to cover their damage since they did not know who did it and were trying to use intimidation to get me to cave. They knocked on the neighbor's door and explained to them that they cannot physically stop me from trying to get into my apartment or harass me and that they were going to give me a report because it sounded like they may be trying to commit insurance fraud. They attempted to tell the officers that they saw my kids hit their car, but they were not having any of it. After that, I started taking pictures and video of my car and theirs every time I parked. A couple of times they came out yelling that I'm not allowed to film their car without permission. I just blew that off. That got really tedious, but it was clear they were not letting go of their grudge against me and my kids, so I invested in a cheap security camera. I put it in the window facing the parking lot below. I would skim it really fast overnight or if I was parked during the day for several hours. I just sped it up really fast looking for when their car parked, etc. One day I pulled up and they were out on their porch. I started to walk upstairs and they made snarky comments like, "Oh, you're not going to go out and video everything?" I actually wanted them to know that my car was still being filmed, so they knew they couldn't make crap up, so I said in the friendliest and non-sarcastic tone I could muster, "Nope. Don't need to. I have a camera in my window doing it for me." This was a mistake because they started flipping out, demanding to know where the camera catches and ranting that I cannot film them on their porch. The camera did not catch their porch and demanding that I show them where all was being filmed and that if I didn't take it down, they would have me arrested, etc. I mentioned that they had already been warned by the apartment complex management to stop contacting me and that I really did not want to have to report them, but if they continued to harass me, I would. Fast forward a few months and a large service van backs into their parked car and drives off. It caused significant damage. My camera caught it all. They actually knocked on my door asking if it had. And honestly, had they been polite, I probably would have helped them out, but they basically just immediately started demanding that I check my camera and that if I wouldn't, it was probably because it was me. I let them know that I would be deleting the footage and not to contact me again. They tried to say that if I did it, it was a crime since it was evidence of a crime and they were going to call the cops once again on me. However, nothing else ever happened, but it is one of the few times in my life I have ever not helped someone when I was in a position to do it, and I don't feel bad at all. The next one is titled, "Awful aromas from my drug dealer neighbor's apartment got out of hand. I made things worse to make things better." Last summer was a hot one. My standing AC window unit was not cutting it, so my only method of cooling the apartment was to open the windows. Well, Stinky Mike's apartment is directly across from mine with a narrow driveway in between. And he keeps his windows open 24/7 so his customers can alert him of their presence no matter the time of day. I really don't care what he does as long as it does not affect me, but his open windows means the cigarette and body odor and the meth stench seeps into the air of the driveway. The only windows I can open face the driveway. 10 minutes of my windows open bring that stench in for hours on end. I have spoken to Stinky Mike about this and nothing comes of it. Property management won't do anything no matter what he does. I have many stories. So what do I do when all cordial communication fails? I figure I cannot open my windows anyway, so I do the only logical thing and throw a stink bomb through his window when he wasn't home. A mixture of the most foul rotten egg and fermented concentrated sewage permeated the air. It was horrid, instant gag-inducing. I was still home when he got back and heard him loudly exclaiming, "What the F is that?" in between retches. I almost felt bad. Just kidding, I would do this again if it comes to it. The next day I found him cleaning out his apartment frantically. It was probably the first time he has ever cleaned that place in the decade he claims to have lived there. I felt accomplished and I'm not afraid to admit that. In my entire life I always fought the fair fight and never got very far. I played dirty and got near instant results. While his apartment still has that same stench, it is far from the aromatic drug den it was before. Maybe I took things a bit too far. Maybe this revenge tactic could be considered chemical warfare. Maybe I'm a genius. All I know is, this summer I was able to have my windows open and enjoy the great indoors at a comfortable temperature. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel, but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously, and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.